All right, here we are. Another computer camera to look in, and I hope your Sabbath days are going very well so far, and that the dreary winter has not gotten to too many of you. I want to play a little game today, and I'm hoping you'll join in with it, at least within our own minds together, and perhaps we'll find out a little more of why we believe what we think we believe. And along the way, we'll also see why God, and this is related, why God, who admits he's allowed the world to be blinded at large, can still hold the world responsible for its conduct, for its sins, despite that blindness. To see that better, the game we're playing is this, just within our own minds. Let's imagine we discovered that, in fact, there is no God. And that means no eternal reward, no final punishment. The Bible's tales of miracles are mythology. And that really, the only thing left from the Bible are the various histories and what we could call philosophical accounts, what some call wisdom literature. Like I said, we're just playing a game, and this is really just to illustrate some points. If in fact there was no God, then you can take the first 4 of the 10 commandments and discard them because those have to do with God, right? That leaves only the remaining 6. Are they of any worth? Because if there was no God, one has to ask, would we, any of us, just throw everything out that we've learned along the way and dive into the world's corrupt conduct in this life? Would we toss it all? Or would we cling to the good that we've found along this way, which has been reflected in the various Bible philosophies, things which clearly produce a healthier life? Aren't those fair questions? Most of the answers are obvious if we've been paying attention to the hard lessons of this life. And let's also be honest. Humanity, by and large, is basically ruled by what some have called operational atheism. That means that most people, in every day of their lives, don't have a single thought about God. It's not on the radar screen, even if they call themselves believers. It's just not the way life works, it's not the way people think. So if there was no God, and we therefore ignore the first 4 commandments, where does that leave us? What are we left with? Take those remaining 6 commandments. Only now, if there's no God, we can see them merely as philosophy. So does that philosophy provide good things for us? Is it still worth following? Even if there's no reward beyond this life, does it have a reward in the here and now? We can look in Exodus 20, and where the commandments are shown otherwise, and we can ask simply, looking at the first of those 6 commandments, its final 6, does it pay to honor the family? Because that's the first one of those remaining 6. The explicit commandment does say honor father and mother, But the rest of the Bible and the words in the New Testament expands that to the entire family structure, in essence, holding it up on high. Do you see where you end up? Let's ask it this way. What society, what family, regardless of their beliefs, wouldn't be benefited by honoring the family structure, by keeping it safe and secure? And those answers are obvious, aren't they? For evidence, just look at the world around us. Look at what happens when the family unit breaks down, when the family is not honored. You don't have to look very far to see the results. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus said, "You'll know them by their fruits." And that's true of everything and everyone. So how about the next commandment in line there, which properly translated says not to commit murder? The New Testament expands that to say we shouldn't even hate, because hatred is the spirit of murder. That's where it starts. So again, what nation, what town, what family, what person wouldn't receive wonderful benefits by holding to that rule of life? Think how that would change our national news right now. If people could somehow dispense with their hatred. And that ties into Jesus' philosophy, or using that term, of saying that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. Again, who wouldn't be benefited by clinging to that belief, to that value, that virtue? And how would that change our lives, individually or nationally? Now apply that same approach to all the remaining commands of God. And the same conclusion will always apply. Even if there was no God, or if, like humanity, we couldn't see God at all, we can still see the obvious benefits of each of those laws. They're inescapable. And they have nothing to do with religion. What they would give to our societies and our lives is plainly evident. When I was growing up, my family, which was basically secular, gave very little mention of God. Nevertheless, they taught, and to an enormous degree, they even lived a solid moral example. And to my surprise, when I started to study the Bible at the ripe old age of 16, I was amazed at how familiar that philosophy was. I'd heard it all before. Because farther back in family history, the family had been religious. 400 years earlier, they had come over to this new world as Puritans. So they were steeped in religion and the Bible. And the teachings stuck through all the following generations. Just like the scriptures say, and this is in Proverbs 22 and verse 6, if you teach a child well in time, they'll remember those teachings and they'll cling to them. They prove to be of worth. A statement was made once that truth points to itself. It's an interesting thing to contemplate. You've heard it, perhaps, in the American Declaration of Independence, which says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That's what it comes down to, even for us. Why do we believe what we believe? Why try to follow a certain standard? Because we know God exists? Or because that's what we've been taught? Or because we're part of a group that holds to these things and we want to conform and fit in? Or is it because we discover that these truths are self-evident? You can see the very laws of God at work in life all around you. Do we believe what we believe merely because that's what we've been taught? If so, that's not enough. It can actually become a case of doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. Haven't we yet come to see why good is good and evil is evil? Are we seeing the sense and sanity of the way as God has shown it to us? All of this actually answers that question of why God can even hold a blinded world responsible for its sins. God hasn't left the world without a witness to good and evil, right and wrong, so that even though true spiritual insight is denied humanity for the time being, people are still responsible for their choices. Cause and effect are still obvious. Most people can clearly see right and wrong, good and evil, at least to some degree. And if we humans choose to go the way of evil, then God's totally within his rights to hold humanity responsible and to punish where it's appropriate. And he has, repeatedly. And we may be seeing some of that now in our current news. He's the only one who knows for sure on that one. Consider these few verses that I'm reading from the English Standard Version, skimming over it really. Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 28. The wrath of God, and that, by the way, means a corrective but loving anger. It's not the human type of anger, and we need to consciously remind ourselves of that whenever we read those scriptures. The wrath of God is revealed against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them. The invisible attributes have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. For although they could know God, they didn't honor him as God, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they've become fools. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie. And since they didn't see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased or reprobate mind. And from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 9 through 12, because they refused to love the truth, therefore God sends them a strong delusion, so that they may believe what is false, what is a lie, in order that they may all be condemned, and that means in this life, not for eternity, who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So God can justifiably hold people responsible, because even an atheist can see the difference between good and evil. Right and wrong are plainly evident, unless people are unwilling to see, meaning they're self-deceived. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that in our modern world. That's why I asked all of us at the start, if there was no God, would we just throw it all out? Or have we at least clearly come to see why there's a way of life versus a way of death? And doesn't that living testimony of right and wrong prove just how alive God really is? And why these choices make the difference in life that all people should be able to recognize. Not a religion, not a tradition, not teachings you perpetuate because your brand of belief dictates it. It's real life. The truth does point to itself. As the Bible testifies, the worth of these truths for us and for all mankind are plainly evident.